Welcome back to another Reddit readings video. If you enjoy these stories, don't be scared to leave a like. Now, do be scared. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. I found out how my wife copes with the death of our son. It was nothing special about that particular night. Nothing at all. The TV was blaring in the living room and the dishes clattered in the kitchen with the promise of dinner. My eldest son Jeremy was sitting cross-legged on the floor and mashing the controller buttons with a force that made me wonder whether the plastic knobs or his thumbs would give out first. Grappling with the thought of a dislocated finger likely being cheaper to fix, I rattled the ice in my whiskey glass and cleared my throat for good measure. Hey, lay off, Jer. Remember what happened to the last one? The last one was still sitting on the garage table, waiting for me to do something about it. Jeremy had thrown one of his fits and smashed it to pieces against the wall. We didn't bug him too much about it back then, as it had only been 2 weeks since the passing of our youngest child and we were all going through something similar. It's funny to think how much coping mechanisms can vary from person to person. Some turn to alcohol, drowning themselves in liquor every night until the consequences of their drunken behavior finally catch up to them. Others take to violence, gritting their teeth through every social interaction until the buildup is finally enough to punch a hole through the wall. Then, there's the type that confines themselves to their room and refuses to come out under any circumstances. The latter was our daughter, Macy, by the way. She was only 14, and yet it somehow felt like she hadn't been a part of our family for a while. When she wasn't at school, she spent all of her time locked away in her room, on the computer, or with her head under the covers. We'd long since given up trying to coax her out and resorted to bringing her dinner plate upstairs and leaving it by her door. I nursed my drink thoughtfully, watching Jeremy swing and miss at a giant orc. "Fuck," he screamed, his shoulders tensing visibly as the frail elven creature he was playing as was lifted off its feet and slammed into the ground. "Fuck this stupid game." Not wanting to end up with another hole in the wall, I scrambled to my feet and pried the controller out of my son's hands. He resisted at first, but my solemn expression seemed to ground him. "Time out, Jer," I said. "Go set the table. Dinner's almost ready." I had no way of knowing this, of course, as my wife was doing the cooking that night, but I had to say something. Plus, I knew it would take a while to set the table just the way my wife liked it. "Set an extra place tonight," my wife Lily said, coming into the dining room. Her cheeks flushed. "Why?" Jeremy stared at her. "Is Macy going to eat with us?" My interest was piqued too, and I wondered if this meant we were going to take the first step towards being a family again. "Yes," Lily's lips pursed into a thin line. "Yes, she is." We stared at her in disbelief. To my knowledge, Macy hadn't been downstairs in over 3 months. Aside from her quick disappearances out the front door, I never saw her at all, and most of the time I missed those altogether. How on earth had my wife convinced her to join us for dinner? I suppose I've been putting off giving any details about my wife. You see, the loss has affected her in a slightly different way. In a sense, I feel like talking about her coping mechanism could potentially drive a permanent rift between us and destroy what is left of our marriage. That being said, I'm not entirely sure there's anything left. Ever since the day our son died, she's been detached from reality. I suppose in a way, we all were, but my wife was different. She couldn't or wouldn't come to terms with the fact that Kendall was gone. No, not in the way you're thinking. She didn't sit on the edge of her bed, crying for hours, nor did she spend every waking moment surrounded by photo albums or toys or clothes. In fact, she didn't cry or dwell on it at all. Instead, she carried the urn around. She carried it around and talked to it as if it were a real person. "Comfortable," she cooed as she strapped it into the baby seat of our car just the other week. I watched her through the rear view mirror, my skin prickling. Needless to say, I didn't like going out with my wife. She turned heads wherever she went, the grocery store, the spa, the bank. She was undoubtedly known as the crazy lady with the urn. She insisted we set a place for our son every time we sat down to eat. Instead of talking to the rest of the family, she'd have conversations with the urn over dinner. It's a wonder she didn't try to feed it as well. At this point, I had no idea who Lily was. Our formerly prosperous marriage had quickly declined into one of convenience, and I often found myself fantasizing about other women. Once my side of the bed had been occupied, I was banished to sleep on the downstairs couch, so I could use the TV to satisfy my own needs without judgment. I'm sure my wife wouldn't have noticed if I'd started bringing dates home, but I never did, secretly hoping a day would come when things went back to normal. "Macy's going to eat with us," Jeremy repeated, his hand frozen in midair. His angry composure seemed to have vanished as quickly as it had appeared. For a moment, the room was enveloped in stunned silence. Then Lily spoke. "Yes, she will be joining us from now on." My heart fluttered as hope filled my lungs. It was finally happening. I could almost feel the broken pieces of our family slithering towards the dining room table from every corner of the house to form a long-lost family unit. "Dinner is almost ready," Lily blurted out, turning on her heel and heading towards the kitchen. "I'll just get Kendall." I got up to pour myself another drink. Of course, she would get Kendall. Of course, things couldn't just go back to normal instantly. It would take time. Even so, as she brought out the urn and sat it on top of the plate, followed by a light kiss on the lid, I knew I could never get used to this. "Shall I call Macy?" I asked, as my wife reappeared with a serving dish, "or will you?" A strange expression crossed her face. She stood there, motionless, as though she was thinking long and hard about what to say. I swallowed, wondering if she hadn't heard my question. "No," she retorted eventually. "She'll join us when she's ready." And that was that. Neither Jeremy nor I questioned it any further, instead tucking into the dinner Lily had prepared for us. We didn't say a word throughout. My wife, on the other hand, said plenty. "Enjoying your peas, Kenny?" She asked the urn amidst bites. "They're fresh from the garden, just how you like them. Remember when we used to pick them together at Grandma's? She taught me how to plant them, too, before she passed away last year." I stared at my plate, my stomach in knots. I needed another drink, badly, but the bottle was in the living room. I wondered if I could slip away quietly to fetch it when Jeremy piped up. "When's Macy coming down?" he asked, arranging his peas in a straight line. "We're almost done with dinner." My wife looked like she'd been jolted awake from a pleasant dream. She began, her cheeks flushing. "Oh, Macy, yeah, perhaps another day." We stared at her, bewildered, but she seemed totally oblivious to our change in demeanor, chatting away to Kendall about rhubarb and its benefits on the body. Jeremy asked again, his voice quivering. "Why won't Macy come down?" It was like she hadn't even heard him. Either that, or she was doing her best to not pay attention. Clearly, it was a subject she didn't want to address. "What's your favorite vegetable?" Sweetie," she giggled, her tone suddenly cold, as if she didn't mean a word of what she was saying. Jeremy sat upright in his chair and waved a hand in front of her face. "Where the fuck's Macy?" I tensed up, knowing full well Jeremy wasn't supposed to speak to his mother that way, but the situation seemed to be spiraling out of control before I could stop it. "Why can't you just talk to us every once in a while, huh?" he exploded. "If you spent half the time with us that you spend with that stupid thing, then maybe we would still be a family." Caught in a fit of rage, Jeremy grasped his end of the tablecloth and pulled it towards him, sending the dishes crashing to the floor. Kendall's urn, sitting atop one of the plates, succumbed to the same fate. Crash, clatter, crack. "Kenny," my wife screeched, leaping to her feet and dashing around the dining table. "Baby." I craned my neck to look over the damage. Amidst the porcelain shards and utensils, the urn lay cracked in half, its lid nowhere to be found. It was empty. "Kendall." Lily landed knees first on the shards, the porcelain crunching under her weight. Nothing could have prepared me for what she did next. Jeremy and I watched in horror as my frantic wife snatched one half of the urn and stuck her tongue out to lick it, her fingers desperately searching for any remains left on the floor. She swept her hands across the ground, cutting her skin up in the process, and shoved the whole lot into her mouth, her eyes rolling back inside her head. I wanted to vomit. No, I wanted to run. My heart was pounding at 10 times its normal rate, threatening to leap out of my throat. My skin was clammy and my vision blurred, but not enough to stop me from seeing the monster that was my wife, stuffing ashes, blood, and porcelain shards down her throat. Jeremy must have felt the same way, but I couldn't see him, my tunnel vision only allowing the image of Lily and her feast. "Mom," I heard him cry, his voice a mixture of terror and disgust. He didn't say anything else either, making do with only a gargled gasp and short, rapid pants. There was nothing to say. Even now that I look back on it, I cannot think of a single coherent sentence that would have befitted the circumstances. I knew instantly that my wife was gone and I'd never be able to see her the same way. Grabbing Jeremy by the arm, I tugged him away from the table, leaving Lily scavenging the floor. I needed to save my children. I'd get Macy out of her room whether she cooperated or not and take them both to my parents' house. At least that way I'd know they were safe before I dealt with my wife, or what was left of her. Jeremy was still in shock as I pulled him up the stairs, so he didn't protest. He seemed to know exactly what we were about to do, and I needed all the help I could get. Macy had never been easy to deal with, and I knew it would take some time to convince her we had to get out. Now, time we did not have, but as we barged in through the door of her bedroom, I instantly knew my plan wasn't going to work out. The room was empty, the bed was made without a single crease, the computer was off, and the desk was arranged neatly as if it were only there for show, rather than a part of someone's living space. A large maroon urn sat in the middle of it. I didn't need to ask. I already knew what happened. She had run out. I found a diary in my attic. What do I do now? My name is Cora Heron, and I have lived in this house my entire life. I know its halls and creaks. I know which step to avoid when you want to sneak a snack late at night, and I know which stone in the paved pathway will knock you on your ass. I have never felt scared or like this house wasn't safe until today. I started college last month but came home for the weekend to see my fathers. My relationship with them has always been close, and I thank whatever spiritual nonsense out there for giving me them as my parents. My dad's conceived me using a surrogate, and while I have met her before, I don't really spend time with her. I was the only child they chose to have, and honestly, I haven't really wanted siblings, someone to share their attention with. No, thank you. I love being their one and only. It was this weekend back home, however, that I found the diary. Despite their attempts to get the time off of work, the Friday I arrived, they both were at their jobs. I was a little irritated but knew we would spend a good amount of time together the next few days, but I was not looking forward to being bored. Normally they're good for a nice binge watch of a trashy show or something like that, but now here I am, alone. I hung out in my room for a bit before I decided to try and get up into the attic. I was tired of rewatching old episodes of Friends, and I wanted to do something with my hands. You know, I wanted to get those brownie points for cleaning something, and the attic would be perfect for that. It hadn't been touched in so long, and damn it, I was gonna get it done and get that sweet, sweet praise. Sorting through boxes and boxes, I found a box of books. Some looked ancient and were crumbling at the spine. Glue long since yellowed and crusty. One stood out, though, a maroon, gold-embellished journal, looking like it hadn't aged a day in the seemingly 90 years it had been vibing here. I glanced through the pages, about to toss it down until the word strangling and knife pop out at me. Looking around the attic, a growing sense of unease slithering up my spine, I flipped to what is seemingly the beginning of the entry and begin to read. What I read cannot be explained. I hope it was fiction. I hope it was all lies. But the horror and fear that has not left me since won't let me not believe this woman. My, however many greats end. What will come next are the words of May Heron, copied down for all of Reddit to see in hopes that someone, somewhere can help me figure out what to do next. April 25th, 1932. We weren't supposed to know that there were favorites. Whenever we would ask our parents which of us they loved the most, they would laugh us off and assure us that we all have something to give equally. Marion is smart. They say she'll bring honor back to our family by being the first to graduate college. Charlotte is beautiful. She'll honor us by marrying well and raising our status. May, which is me, May is strong. May will honor us by protecting our family from what we would ask, huddled around them late at night. They always reach out and stroke each of our cheeks in turn and shush us, telling us that we don't need to worry. But today, I turned 20 and it was the most special birthday. Most girls in our respective age groups have a big blowout bash for their 16th and receive jewelry and trinkets. But for our family, 20 is the real one. 20 means you have crossed the threshold from girl to woman. It also means privacy, sweet privacy. Every 20th birthday that us three have had, a big breakfast is made before the other two of us are pulled from the house, soothed with promises of our own fun. The only thing that worries me a bit is when we returned after Marion and Charlotte's. They didn't seem okay. They seemed so tired and spent that I remember sassily remarking on it, asking what extravagant things they did while we spent the night with our grandmother. Their eyes were hollow and sad, and Mama would shush me, cheekily responding that turning 20 is hard work and I will one day see. Marion and Charlotte woke me up, giddy with the promise of presents and my favorite breakfast. I followed them downstairs, their voices high-pitched and sweet with emotion. When we arrived at the table, a beautiful spread was laid out and they both shrieked out their happy birthdays before grabbing me and squeezing tightly, making me feel truly loved. When they pulled back though, there were tears in their eyes. Marion grasped my hands and apologized again and again and again. Charlotte was in the background, her angelic face a blank mask. I was puzzled. I wanted to reassure my sister and let her know that I forgave her, whatever her trespasses may be, and she hurriedly filled me in, Charlotte gasping in indignation. "You will get 3 visitors tonight. We cannot help you. This is what we have been preparing for. Mama and Papa have already left. You cannot call for help and no one will come for you until tomorrow. You must keep your chin up and hold your head high. You are Mayharon and no one will keep you down. Do you understand?" I wanted to cry, but my eyes stayed dry. I didn't understand what was happening. Charlotte hissed that Marion should have said nothing, telling her that they didn't get the advantage. Why should I? Marion sadly looked at Charlotte and whispered, "Because I want this one to live." They leave and I am left alone, standing in the middle of a well-decorated kitchen, the site of many a family dinner where we have laughed, cried, grieved. I hope that whatever would happen to me doesn't lend to a dinner full of sorrow. I noticed a parcel on the table, my name scrawled in my mother's loopy font, and I gingerly picked it up, feeling the weight of the envelope in my hand. 2 items fall out of the package, 1 small dagger and 1 small capsule. "My dearest May, today you are 20. Papa and I knew this day would come and we fully believe that you will be the one to make it this time. You will receive 3 guests. Do not let them in. Do not be fooled, however. They will get in anyway. You cannot stop them. You are a heron and you will live. If you don't, then you are not a heron anymore anyway. I am sorry if this sounds cold, darling. We both love you so much, but we simply cannot grieve another loss. Papa and I have treated you well, haven't we? We gave you a good life. All of the etiquette classes, the evenings of study as we helped you rise to the top of your class. Remember that, my dove. Should this be your last night, know that you are cherished and a glorious part of our lives. I hope you make it. I am so sorry, May. I know at this moment you will want to flee and call the police or someone to come and help you, but you cannot. That would be cheating. Papa removed the phone in the night, and if any help is given past the point of reading this, I cannot promise it'll be good help. So trust me when I give you this advice, do not listen to them. You know who you are. Your instincts are as strong as you are. You do not need to kill to finish the evening, but if you do not, they will come back. Finally, you do not know them. They are not who you think. From this moment on, May, you are alone. I hope the dagger helps you return to us, and if not, if a merciful release is what you desire, the capsule will grant that wish. Goodbye, my darling. I hope we meet again. Love, Mama. She was right. I wanted to flee and get as far away from here as possible. I started hyperventilating. I was in the middle of a feast fit for a king, and here I am, in a chair, head between my knees, and despite what the letter says, I did not believe that I am strong enough for whatever is coming. Just then a knock at the door and I heard Marion's bell-like voice ring out. But it sounded wrong. It sounded dirty. May, I need you to let me in. May, be a good girl and let sister in, okay? I promise you it was just a prank. A tinkling laugh. Funny, huh? Now let me in, May. My body acted on its own accord to let her in, but my instincts kicked in. Do not let them in. Her voice grew agitated. This is not funny, May. You let me in right this instant. I did the opposite and shoved a chair under the door. May, the voice shrieked, harpy-like in volume and tone. You ungrateful waste of father's seed. Let me in right this minute before I tear your heart out. Tears streamed down my face and I shook my head wordlessly, knowing she can't see me, or rather praying that she cannot. The door slammed against its locks and I could see the door beginning to give against what sounds like much more than Marion's diminutive frame. Wood splintered from it and I ran. I ran to the living room where we have spent so many evenings, and I was so frightened. I felt as if I could pass out when I heard it. Footsteps, right in the hall. She made it past the door and there was no longer even the illusion of safety. May, called out Marion's voice. I just want to talk to you, May. Don't you want to hear how much we all hate you? How much we all wish you had never been born? I shoved my hands over my ears and tears were stinging my eyes with their saltiness, and I began to fear that I will never be able to see again. I worried that should I survive, I will never unhear these things my sister is now saying to me. Come here, May. Let me tell you how unwanted you are and how much mother wanted a boy. I heard her steps grow closer and I panicked, wanting to escape and leave while also feeling incapable. I couldn't do this. I wouldn't do this. Why was she doing this? Then I remembered Mama's letter. You do not know them. This was not Marion. Marion loves me. Marion helped me the little she could, even when Charlotte was telling her no. Marion would not say this to me. Gathering my strength, I clutched the dagger. On shaky knees, I walked to where Marion's voice was emanating. Poor little May, so dumb, so ugly, doomed to be the embarrassment of the family. Oh, how people look at us with disgust and pity when they see you with us. It's like having a wart that we have never been able to remove no matter how hard we. Her voice was cut off. My hand was covered in a thick, black substance. Black smoke spills out of the wound and fills the area around me. My dagger had found its home in her chest as she rounded the corner, and despite knowing this is not my sister, my eyes were full of tears and I whispered that I am sorry before I twist. She screeches, eyes rolling back into her head, and she is gone. She is no more. I was not foolish enough to believe this was the end of it. She fell too easily and too quickly for the amount of warning that I was given, and I didn't know if I could do this again. I tried to eat some of the food. If Marion was only the first of three, it stood to reason that she would be the easiest. They were only going to get harder, and I didn't want to know how much worse it could get. Her words still rang in my ears, and while I knew inside that it was not Marion, I was unsure if I would ever be able to look at her again. Day faded slowly into evening, and I was strung up with adrenaline and fear. I checked all of the drawers for more weapons, and I found nothing. All of the silverware save for the plastic cutlery that they left for me on the table had been removed, and when I tested it to see how much pressure it can withstand, it snapped in half. I steadfastly ignored the capsule on the table, its blithe appearance mocking me. I placed the door back where it goes and hoped it stays, though Mama's letter says it won't matter. I was about to renew my search for anything that could be blunt enough to protect myself with when I heard it. A faint singing coming from the direction of the warped door. Oh, little May, poor and frail, poor little May, will she prevail? The singing grew louder and more childlike before a light tapping hit the door. May, please let me in. I did not answer. May, do not leave me out here. What would Mama say about your manners? I still did not answer. May, you are making me sad, and you know I do not like to be sad. Let me in. On her last words, the already frail door gave in and was shoved into the room, revealing Charlotte standing there, a maniacal look staining her features. Why do you make me sad, May? This is why we chose you for this. All you do is disappoint. Even her doppelganger was more graceful than I could ever hope to be as she crossed into the room, and this time I was not waiting for her to sling more words at me like Marion did. I rushed at her, dagger raised, and I could see that the element of surprise worked out for me as shock flashed for a brief second on her face before being replaced with a wicked smile. Oh, okay, little May, if that's what you want. I was grappling to the floor, and my sister, who once held me while I cried after a boy at school called me ugly, was now straddling me, her face inches from mine. Did you know you were a mistake? Did you know that we despise your existence, all of us? You're proof that people should not procreate after a certain age. I was thrashing as she sprayed spittle in my face, her breath rancid and reeking of burnt meat. I struggled as she continued on. Did you know how much we all prayed for an accident when you were little? A minor drowning mishap, maybe, a kidnapping, anything to rid us of you. This was still my sister's visage saying these things to me, and the fissure in my heart created from Marion's previous insults was ripped further with Charlotte. I fought against her as her hands wrapped around my throat and she leaned closer. We tried to kill you, you know, numerous times. Her hands were growing tighter around my throat and my vision was turning black. Her nails were sure to leave imprints in my skin, reminding me of this day for weeks to come. I couldn't breathe, and these hands that brought me comfort in some of my hardest times were killing me. I heard ringing in my ears and I felt my body start to go limp. I didn't want to die. I couldn't die like this, with my sister strangling the life out of me. I didn't want to hurt Charlotte, but I remembered Mama's letter, and I strengthened myself with the knowledge that I am stronger than this mockery of my sister. I am the strength of the Heron family, and I will prevail. I finally bucked strong enough to throw her off balance a little bit, but it worked to get her dislodged enough for me to scramble out and try to get away. She grabbed my ankle and pulled me back, and as she was dragging me, I threw my hand out and slapped her with all of my might. She looked shocked for a second before renewing her assault, grasping my ankle again and gripping tightly, much tighter than she should be able to. I gasped for air still, but the adrenaline surging through me helped me scramble as I patted the ground where I must have dropped the knife in the original scuffle, and blessedly felt the hard handle before grabbing it. I swiped at Charlotte's face and hit her cheek. She screamed as black steam began to pour out. I swiped again at her throat and she again shrieked out her anger before disappearing. Much as Marion did, I was once again alone, panting and sweaty. My throat felt like I had smoked 100 cigars, and I did not feel like this fight was as even as the first, and I knew that my earlier thought that they were only getting harder was correct. I pulled myself up by grabbing the edge of the table and sat upon it, inspecting my ankle. Dark red marks marred my flesh, burning in pain. I wondered if my neck looked the same. I did not know when the next one was coming, and all I desired was defeat. I just wanted to sleep and end this game. I couldn't possibly hear my mother or even worse, my father say these cruel things to me. I just wanted to be done. I was tired of the constant thudding in my chest, my heart trying to burst out in its terror. I eyed the envelope on the table and then glanced at the capsule. I reached out and took it, rolling it in my hand before I heard what I hoped was my third and final visitor. There was no preamble this time, no pageantry as with Marion and Charlotte. The door slowly creaked open and there stood a small girl, about my size. She was pretty in a simple way, and while she was not threatening, an air of danger radiated from her and my fear reached a new level. "Hello," she said, looking at me expectantly. "May I come in?" I was mute, puzzled by her politeness. "I will come in regardless. May, let me in and this will be easier." I stayed silent and did not move, listening to the letter Mama left me. She sighed, shaking her head. Mama's letter. Still nothing from my end. Very well then. She came in and took a seat by the now cold food, still placed on the table. Fearing for my life had left me little motivation to clean. She gestured at the seat and I started to feel like a guest in my own home. "May, my name is AmITheA. Do you know me? Don't bother answering. I am not going to wait for one if you are still holding on to Mama's advice. I am, rather, the eldest Heron. I doubt you would know me. They couldn't have explained to you what happened to me without ruining the birthday surprise, I suppose. So I will have to do so myself. This test, May, is meant to check to see if you have the will to survive and carry on the Heron name with pride. I did not pass this. I tried my damnedest and it was not good enough. I was raised with love and told that while Marion and Charlotte were smart and beautiful, I was kind. I was so nice and my values would change everything. Do you know what they did to me, May? They lied. I changed nothing while dying on the living room floor. I did nothing to fix this line and I have never made a difference. But you know what that's like, don't you? You know what it's like to sit there when Mama and Papa tell us what makes them proud of us and feel bitter that yours is not as impressive. Strength, May. What is that? Don't Marion and Charlotte have that as well? They passed their test, didn't they? What makes you special then? I assure you, when you die tonight, they will replace you like they replaced me. I was 20, Marion was 10, and Charlotte was 5. Mama should not have been having more children at 40, but she did because she could not stand the idea of one of her children losing. She wanted another chance to be oh so proud and smug. So when you die, May, when you are expiring on the ground and wondering what makes you so much worse than Marion and Charlotte, know this, you will be forgotten and the next child will not even know of your existence until they too turn 20 and you haunt them, just as I am doing to you. She paused, checking to see my reaction to her monologue. I was impassive. I am May Heron and I am the strength of the Heron family, and I could hold it together while this stranger fills my head and heart with dread. I could take this as she slung all of my buried fears into my face. Do you want to know what my tests were? Marion and Charlotte, small children, telling me that while I was kind, I would never bear children. No man would ever love me. No man would ever be able to look at me for long enough to even entertain the idea of building a family with me. My final one was the love of my life. I defeated Marion and Charlotte. While creepy, hearing small children tell you things that you know they don't know the meaning of loses its power. But Frederick, hearing him tell me that I needed to let go of the idea that he loved me, that he saw any kind of redeemable feature in me. He laughed, May, laughed and laughed until he cried tears of black and I could not take it. My heart shattered and crumbled and he just rejoiced in my misery. He said such things to me and I took the only way out that I could. At this, she looked at the capsule that I had placed upon the table. I'll tell you something, May. It's so nice here. My eyes flew open in surprise. It's so nice here and so wonderful. There are no expectations. I am free and happy and I see Marion and Charlotte every night in my dreams. I still dream. I still feel it. I am just no longer tethered to all of these attachments that hurt you. She leaned closer. The nights you spend crying and hating yourself, wanting to break free of the shadow of the incomparable Heron family. You could be free. You could be with me, May. You could be so happy and I would love you even more than they pretend to. I promise, little sister, come with me and you will never feel less than again. I reached out to take the pill. I studied it for so long that I expected her to be gone when I looked back up, but she was still there, watching me as if I were the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. My voice cracked after so long of non-use. See, can you hug me while I do it? Her face broke into a smile as she held her arms out. Of course, it would be an honor. I sank into her arms and adrenaline once again pulsed through me before I slammed my fist into her stomach. The dagger that has been an extension of my arm this entire time finding its place deep inside her. Her eyes widened in anger, but it was too late. She was gone and I was alone in the room. I was never able to tell her that I was sorry for doing so, that I was sorry for replacing her, and even more sorry that I wasn't sorry that I had been chosen to. When I surveyed the room and could see that I was finally free from them, I collapsed and sobbed and finally felt all of the fear that I had been soaking in. I was done. I could rest. I did not relax, and when I heard my family come in and surround me with praise, I sat there. My eyes were dull and I could not muster up relief that they were home. They peppered my face with kisses and I was stuck in my head, hearing the words of my sisters, feeling the emotional wound. I made my excuses and took my leave as my father beamed at me with pride. On my way out of the room, I turned and asked my family one thing: why? They all shrugged and all they offered me were smiles that did nothing to comfort me or answer the questions in my heart. I do not know why I had to do this, why our family has been cursed this way. I do not know if my heart will ever settle down and cease its rapid thumping. I do know that a heart is capable of beating once broken. I do know that I am strong, stronger than any of my three sisters. I also know something my family doesn't, that they didn't even think to confirm. AmITheA did not bleed. She did not seep the black smoke as my other sisters did. She shrieked and left, and while I wanted to feel relief, Mama's letter came back to me. You do not need to kill to finish the evening, but if you do not, they will come back. AmITheA will be back and I don't know when. I don't know if I am supposed to do this all over again. I don't think I can. This evening will never stop haunting me. It will never let me take a full breath again without feeling the pressure of Charlotte's hands on my windpipe or the words slung at me by Marion. I hope in the future I am stronger. I hope that I can weather this storm again and again until AmITheA is finally slain. I will not be able to live without fear until I do. Pray for me, diary. Pray for my success, but most of all, pray that I am not already dead. That's it. I have never heard of May or AmITheA before. I was the first girl in so many years, and I wonder if my father even has a clue about this curse, as they called it. I want to laugh and applaud the creative writing. I want to poke holes and scoff and call this woman I won't ever meet a liar. But I don't. I believe her. The air in the attic is stale. Was it always this dark here? I sit in my dread and think about how I would survive hearing my father say similar things to me, and I can't even imagine it. I would die. I would hate to even hear them say they're disappointed in me, let alone that they regret me. It would kill me. I ask for your help, Reddit, for one simple reason. I turn 20 next month and I don't want this to happen to me. I am terrified that on the morning of my 20th, I am going to wake up to doppelgangers of my father's and some unknown third specter. I can't let this happen to me. May at least got the warnings. Does my father even know? Could he know? Papa Albert was not a heron before marriage, and I doubt he would know. But Dad, does he? Does he hate me so much that he just wouldn't warn me? No, he can't. He loves me. I know he does. Please, help me. We found a town that doesn't appear on any maps. This probably isn't the smartest idea to post this here, but I really have nowhere else to turn. People need to know about this, even if it's the last thing I ever do. By the time you read this, I'll probably be dead, or vanished mysteriously like everyone else who's been unfortunate enough to stumble down this rabbit hole. That's exactly how it began too, a rabbit hole on the internet that kept leading me deeper and deeper like the countless others I've seen before. Cicada 3301, The Finders, LHOHQ, Missing 411, Erratas, 11BX1371, Markovian Parallax Denigrate, Number Stations, The Wyoming Incident, and all the others. You've probably seen them too, or at least heard of them, if you're anything like me. And because you're here, I'm guessing you follow these mysteries when they crop up. Most of the time they end in rather anticlimactic ways. Some artistic project, an ARG, or the majority just being a dead end which devolves into endless speculation. Not this time. Chigabas is different. Me and my friends have spent years following these sorts of things, along with various endeavors in urban exploration and abandoned locations. We've had some odd encounters and weird things happen to us, but nothing that could be considered concrete proof of something haunted or supernatural. A buddy of mine, Ryuko, works as a petroleum scout. Basically, he flies all over the country trying to find promising future drill sites. Recently, he was out in a remote town known as Thompson in northern Manitoba looking for new potential locations when he found something odd. He explained that he had been going over public ordnance records around the city and found something odd. I'll probably butcher this explanation, so if anyone knows better, feel free to correct me. From what I understood, he had the blueprints of buildings, pipelines, and underground wires. They of course have certain mandates that must be followed that prevent them from drilling too near existing structures. He explained that he was comparing these blueprints when he noticed a section that didn't match up with satellite imaging. He then said a bunch of scientific shit which I didn't understand, which basically meant that the blueprints indicated that this particular area was supposed to be nothing but forest. But the satellite imaging contradicted that. He said it looked as though someone had intentionally doctored both the images and blueprints, but wasn't able to make them both accurately match. He spent some time researching the history of the area, but couldn't find much of anything online or in historical records. He gave me the coordinates of the area too, but like him I couldn't find much of anything. I'll be honest, I didn't really think there was much to it, but Ryuko seemed adamant that something about it was weird. He made sure to lecture me about the plethora of weird reports from the Canadian North, and although chilling, I failed to see how it related to his discovery. Our correspondence went on for months about it, even after Ryuko and his team had deemed the location unsuitable. He just couldn't seem to let it go, even managing to get some of our other friends enraptured with the mystery. Eventually, he messaged me one night with a new development. "There's a town out there," he wrote. "What? How do you know?" I wrote back. "One of the locals told me about it after we put down a few drinks. He said he didn't like talking about it, but he knew that there was a town there many years ago. He doesn't know what happened to it though, or even what its name is." His words didn't make a lot of sense to me. Okay, but if it is a town, then why wouldn't it show up on Google Maps? Exactly, it's like someone has gone through a great deal of effort to erase it. I felt chills roll down my spine reading that, but still didn't know whether to buy it. In our modern day of computers and GPS, it's hard to think an entire town could go undocumented. But apparently that was the case. I'm gonna go out there. I had a feeling that response was coming, and it made my gut churn. I've always felt as though if I were in a horror movie, I'd be the first one to die. That's partially due to my bad luck, but more so is my willingness to indulge in questionable ideas for the sake of curiosity. In my defense, Ryuko managed to rope in two of our other friends as well, Panzerwaffle and Dunkleosteus. I know it's needlessly edgy to go by codenames, but I'd rather not reveal their real ones, so I'll just refer to them as the names they use online. So the four of us kept researching for a few more weeks, and after we finally managed to align our schedules, we set a date. We all met up in Winnipeg to begin our journey. It was about an 8-hour drive up to Thompson, and from there only Ryuko knew the rest. But he assured us it wasn't much further beyond that. The vast country roads of the Canadian Midwest soon unveiled before us, giving us front row seats of endless oceans of dirt and prairies. The stifling atmosphere of the city soon gave way to the fresh air of the wilderness, so at the very least it was a good break from the rat race. The four of us discussed theories and joked most of the way out there, until Panzerwaffle raised an interesting point. So I saw this thread online where this guy was talking about his time working on mobile security stuff. He said he was former military and got recruited after into this private security firm that went all over the world. It didn't really seem that interesting until he mentioned going to a hidden town outside of Thompson. The rest of us perked up at that mention. Yeah, he was saying this area has a lot of strange reports of cryptids and weird sightings. Wendigos, aliens, Bigfoot, you name it. I looked at Ryuko in the driver's seat. That true? First I've heard of it. I mean, the Canadian North is pretty well known for strange sightings, so I'm not too surprised. Dunkleosteus then cut in. Man, we are not prepared for shit like that. I don't know about this. Panzer chuckled and leaned over to pat him on the shoulder. Little late to back out now, bro. He laughed again, but Dunk looked no more reassured. Before long, the cities had vanished in the rear view, leaving only an endless expanse of road and flat grassy prairies in all directions. We had a good time thanks to Ryuko lead footing the pedal, and arrived in Thompson around 3 p.m. The town itself was little more than a few blocks, a couple restaurants and a hospital, which was mostly what I expected from its remote location. Thompson is essentially the final outpost of the Canadian North. Beyond it lies a vast expanse of untamed wilderness that stretches for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. There are a few indigenous localities scattered throughout the area, but most are accessible only by flying or I guess walking for a few months if you're a lunatic. The point is, all the roads stop at Thompson, but our destination was further beyond. Thankfully, not much further though, and Ryuko assured us we could be there within the hour. But first we decided to stop at one of the town's diners and get yourself some food. The waitress got us a booth by the window and got us menus. We spent a few minutes glancing through until she returned for our orders. The restaurant had few patrons at the time and our food arrived quite soon after. The chicken fried salmon wasn't half bad, and the others seemed to enjoy their meals as well. The waitress returned after we'd finished and laid out the tab, peppering us with a few more questions. She obviously knew we weren't local, and we told her we'd made the trek up from Winnipeg for a camping trip. She mentioned a few spots she thought we should check out, but I can't recall what they were now. I looked at Ryuko and could tell what he was thinking before he even said it. So I heard a rumor that there's a town out here that doesn't appear on any maps. He paused and the waitress cocked her head at him. Do you know anything about that? She seemed taken aback and her mouth curled into an uncertain grimace. I don't know anything about that. Have a good rest of your day. She then abruptly turned and walked away from the booth. The rest of us exchanged some glances of our own as we laid a pile of cash on the table to cover the bill. Clearly, she wasn't being entirely truthful with us, or so it seemed. Her sudden shift from cheerful to almost panicked unsettled me a bit though. We all loaded back into Ryuko's truck and headed out soon after. Several residents were out in the streets then, and all of them seemed to stare at us with vacant expressions as we drove through town. It seemed a bit hostile of what one would expect of a small Canadian town. But perhaps I just misread the vibes. The roads beyond Thompson were strictly dirt and gravel, and the further we drove the less maintained they became. I've got to be vague when describing the exact road we traveled because I don't want to be responsible for anyone trying to go find this place themselves. There's quite a few campgrounds around the area, and beyond that roads that seemingly go nowhere at all. It was around this point when cell service became non-existent, and not just zero bars, but full-on lack of connection to a provider altogether. We anticipated that, of course, but it felt a bit unnerving that if anything went wrong, then we were on our own. We kept driving along the trail for close to an hour, bending and weaving deeper into the woods and further from civilization. The area around seemed truly wild, with no road signs nor any real sign of human presence at all. Ryuko had pointed to the spot on the map where we were headed, and it made me question why any town would be built in such a place. It had to be an old mining town, I thought, but none of us knew for certain. Eventually, the trail split into 3 different paths. After some debate, we took the path on the right, which was heavily degraded. We only made it about half a click before the road simply became too narrow. We got out and had a quick look around, but it was clear there wasn't much there. After taking a good 20 minutes to help Ryuko back his truck out, we finally returned to the split in the path. It was then we noticed there was what appeared to be a pole lying off in the woods. Dunk and Panzer went and grabbed it, and sure enough, found a sign attached to it as well. It was so rusted that any previous message was indecipherable, but it seemed to indicate we were close. We followed that path for about a kilometer before something caught our attention on the side of the road. Ryuko slowed the truck down and we realized it was yet another trail. This one appeared gutted, as though it once had pavement or concrete but had since been removed. The ground was flat and graded, but clearly untraveled and overgrown with weeds and shrubs. This has to be it, Ryuko said, glancing at his map. He put the truck in park and the 4 of us stepped out. There we eyed the long-forgotten trail before us, but aside from the suspiciously flat terrain, there was little indication anything else was out there. You sure this is it? I mean, I don't see much, Dunk asked, and Ryuko nodded, stepping forward. Oh yeah, no question. A road used to run right through here. That observation was an unusual one, and I wasn't the only one who picked up on it. Why remove the road? I asked. Ryuko turned back, not seeming to catch my drift. I mean, I had assumed a town this far away from everything would be an old mining or lumber town that just ran its course and was abandoned when the work dried up. But if they went to the trouble of removing the road that led to it, I let the words hang in the air, and Ryuko understood them. Then someone is trying to hide it. Panzer and Dunk looked at one another, and a sudden air of apprehension seemed to set in. It's always a bit nerve-wracking walking into abandoned locations, but this one seemed different somehow. What if this is some government base or some Area 51 type shit? Panzer asked. So, Area 52, Dunk replied with a chuckle. I glanced around, but once again it was clear that we were well and truly in the middle of nowhere. If that were the case, I assume they would have arrested us by now, I replied, gesturing around to the endless blockade of trees. No one's here. Dunk then scoffed. Oh, just because you don't see them doesn't mean no one's here. He was right, but still the thought remained. Ryuko seemed to ponder a moment before glancing back down the hidden trail. Well, only one way to find out. The 4 of us got back into his truck, and Ryuko maneuvered it onto the overgrown trail. Leaves crunched and the chassis rumbled around as he began to drive forward upon it. It was rough, but not as rough as nature would have been. We drove onward at a reduced rate for about 5 minutes, seeing nothing but trees and thickets on either side. Eventually, the road began to curve left, and soon after something emerged on the side of the trail. It looked like a telephone pole at first, a dark brown column made of wood standing about 15 feet tall. As we got closer, a series of grooves and markings emerged upon it. It looked like a type of totem pole, and at the top sat a small wooden figurine of what appeared to be a bird of some kind. Vuko slowed his truck down beside it, and we all stared up in silence. Looks like they didn't remove everything. Vuko broke the silence, glancing at me in the front passenger seat. Is that an owl on the top? Panzer asked. Yeah, looks like it, Vuko replied. Man, what was that movie from a few years ago in Alaska? You know, the one where they think they're seeing owls, but it's actually aliens? Dunk asked. Oh, the fourth kind, Panzer replied. Almost in unison, we all seemed to eye the owl at the pinnacle once again. Sure hope that has nothing to do with our situation, Panzer concluded. We remained there for another minute or so, until Ryuko simply put the truck into drive and continued moving forward. Around the next bend in the woods was all it took to find it. A row of buildings emerged in the distance, dark, neglected, and empty. Ryuko's truck crept slowly onward, allowing more and more of the desolate place to come into view. The walls were wrapped with vines, and the streets cracked with weeds and saplings. It almost looked like a scene straight out of an apocalyptic movie, and the derelict streets had clearly stood vacant for a few decades at the least. Vuko pulled his truck to a stop, and without a word we all stepped out. Oh shit, it does exist, Dunk spoke, eyeing the rest of us with a keen smirk. Some of the buildings looked partially burned, but overall, the majority were mostly untarnished except by the creeping advance of nature. No graffiti on the walls and no obvious signs of major damage that one would expect from a natural disaster of some kind. As far as we could see, there were no cars there either. It was as if the entire town had just one day decided to get up and leave. Well, someone was here at some point. Panzer spoke up, laying a hand on the rotting hull of an old store. The words "General Routine Convenience Store" were just barely discernible upon the faded oak sign above the door. So where'd they all go? And why was the waitress covering their existence? Dunk replied, I'll admit I got the same vibe, but I wasn't ready to throw her under the bus yet. If anything, she just seemed afraid to even discuss the topic. Don't know, man, but I do know this doesn't look like no Area 52 to me. Panzer and Dunk shared a laugh. Ryuko, meanwhile, had ventured further away to the intersection and paused to glance at something laying in the street. He turned back and met my stare, giving a nod of his head for me to join him. I did just that, and once at his side I found what had held his interest. Lying on the ground was what appeared to be an old placard, heavily worn but with the words still mostly discernible. Jagaba's Town Center. Jagaba's. That's the name of this town, I suppose. I spoke. Ryuko nodded, averting his gaze ahead. Sound familiar? I asked, but Ryuko just shook his head. Down the block about 200 meters was a much larger building than the others. Double swaying doors lay mangled at the entrance and wedged open, while the hull of the building was riddled with holes and broken windows. The building looked in much worse condition than the others, and naturally that drew our attention. Panzer and Dunk joined us and we all approached. The holes in the walls almost looked like bullet impacts, but we couldn't be certain. As we got near, it became evident that it was some sort of old-fashioned hospital or infirmary. Inside was remarkably clean considering the outer conditions. There was still broken debris scattered on the linoleum, but unlike most abandoned buildings, there was no sign of graffiti or previous squatters, probably because nobody in their right mind would venture that far out. The building only had a main hallway and about half a dozen rooms, and so searching through it didn't take long. There wasn't much to see anyways, just file cabinets and medical equipment a couple decades old. What was interesting was the stash of medications still in the cabinet, many of which were dated to the early 90s. Things were becoming a bit more unnerving then, as it was evident that whatever happened there had happened quickly, and its residents had very little time to pack up. That is, if they even made it out at all. Hey guys, look at this, Ryuko called out from down the hallway. After reaching his side, we found he was examining a hatch on the floor. He managed to wrench it open, revealing a ladder which led into a dark passage below. We took turns peering down below and saw a narrow, dirt corridor that stretched in both directions for quite a considerable distance. Who wants to go down first? Ryuko asked, a smirk evident behind his mask. None of us answered back, and instead we all just seemed to silently inspect the passageway beneath us. Something was bothering me then, something lingering heavy in the air. I still don't know how to explain it, but my gut was telling me this was not a place I should be. Ryuko eventually answered his own question by climbing onto the ladder. and beginning to descend. A moment later, he touched down into the dirt below. He lit his flashlight and pointed it up ahead and back behind at the two extensions of the passage. "What do you see?" Dunk asked. "Not much. Just looks like a tunnel. Maybe an old mine," Ryuko called back. "Why would a mine be underneath a hospital?" Dunk glanced at us. "Poor planning maybe," Panzer replied. As they conversed, something suddenly moved outside the window. I was the only one who saw and didn't see it well, but it definitely looked like a shadow darting away as I looked. "What the hell was that?" I pointed it out and the others quickly swiveled towards the window. I scurried towards the window and glanced outside cautiously, but saw nothing but an empty field of overgrown wild grass. "What is it?" Dunk asked. "I don't know, I just saw something move." By that point, the sun was very low in the sky and the darkness was encroaching fast. The others were clearly feeling a bit unnerved by that point, as was I, and we all seemed to reach the silent conclusion that it was time to leave. "We shouldn't stay after dark. We can come back tomorrow," Dunk stated as he headed towards the front door. Panzer then returned to the hatch and yelled down into it. Ryuko, time to go." He waited a few seconds, but there was no response. "Ryuko, you hear me?" he called again, but once more there was no reply. Panzer then sighed and knelt to the hatch. "Hey man, we gotta go. Can you hear me?" He waited a moment, but I heard nothing. Panzer then waved us over and climbed into the hatch. Begrudgingly, I followed, knowing I couldn't let him go alone. Dunk and I soon followed him down the ladder, finding ourselves in some underground tunnel a moment later. Panzer shined his flashlight forward and behind us, but we saw nothing but an empty passage. "Where the hell did he go?" Panzer asked. "Us HHH, keep your voice down." Dunk shushed back, kneeling in the dirt and pointing out the footprints. "He went this way." The three of us moved onward until reaching the bend in the tunnel. Around it, we saw the passage mushroom outward into a substantially larger room. Several large columns stood floor to ceiling, decorated in an entirely unexpected Greek-Roman sort of architecture. I'm no expert in that stuff, but the columns looked like they'd have been more at home in the Pantheon rather than some buried tunnel in North Canada. The floor too appeared to be a scuffed marble, which I can't imagine would be cheap or easy to install. At the far end of the room, my heart sank as I spotted a person kneeling to the ground in the shadows. "Ryuko, is that you?" The person whipped their head around, confirming it was Ryuko. He put a shushing finger to the mouth on his mask and gestured us over. "What's wrong?" I asked. Ryuko silently pointed down the passage in front of us. My heart skipped a beat as I stared into the fathomless dark tunnel before us, but of course I saw nothing. Behind us, Panzer and Dunk entered the middle of the chamber and glanced around. Clearly as mystified as I was, they spread out around the room to inspect the area as Ryuko, and I continued staring. I asked Ryuko about what he saw, and he just said he thought he saw someone, but didn't elaborate. "Hey guys, look at this," Dunk whispered. I turned to see him standing in front of a large mural on the wall. As I got close, I saw all sorts of squiggly lines and symbols engraved upon the wall. The entire thing was probably 5 meters wide and 3 tall. The entire portrait spread out almost like a massive spider web, but I couldn't tell what I was looking at. "It's a map," Dunk declared. I didn't think it likely at first glance, but as I continued staring, I realized he could be onto something. That theory had some bewildering implications, however. Dunk then lifted a hand and pointed at a spot on the lower left. "This is where we came in. These symbols must be entrances or exits." The spot he pointed had a rectangular symbol with a line down the middle, and I spied dozens of others around the mural. I traced the route we had traveled to get there, and it did seem to match. We hadn't traveled far, but if that was actually a map and it was in any way to scale, then the entire system was absolutely colossal. The small area we traversed barely even registered when compared with the whole thing, and its entirety must have comprised dozens upon dozens of kilometers worth of tunnels. Who would build something like that? And how and why was it done? There were quite a variety of other symbols on there as well, but with no map index, we had little context as to what they represented. Towards the upper center of the map was a large open space with a unique symbol within it. It was almost as if all the other pathways were leading towards it, which of course made it an interesting sight. Unfortunately, it was probably several kilometers worth of tunnels to get there. "What the hell is this place?" Panzer asked, but I think it was more rhetorical than anything. There was this odd scent lingering in the air, but I couldn't place it. This wasn't my first venture in urban exploration, but this time felt different. Something about the place was deeply unsettling, and although I tried just writing it off as my nerves, the feeling wouldn't dissipate. "Oh shit," Ryuko suddenly proclaimed in a whisper. I turned and saw him slowly backing away from the passageway. I was about to ask what it was when I saw it, and my heart stood still. Ahead of him in the corridor was the silhouette of someone obscured in shadow. The air seemed to drain from the room in an instant, as did the breath from my lungs. The person in the tunnel before us remained motionless and silent. Ryuko had then ignited his flashlight, which beamed against the ground. With a quivering hand, he began to lift it towards the person in the tunnel. I said a silent prayer, hoping it would simply be an angry hobo, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Its face was gaunt, with gleaming eyes that reflected the light of the flashlight like an animal would. Jagged teeth and an overbite protruded from chapped lips, and a narrow tongue seemed to taste the air like a snake. The second the light touched its eyes, it let out this god-awful wail. We took off without a second thought. In only a few seconds, we reached the hatch and began rapidly clambering back up. I looked back, but saw no one pursuing us. Ryuko slammed the hatch behind us, and we all breathed a small sigh of relief. For the briefest of moments, I felt we were safe, but that notion didn't last. "There's something out there, you see that?" Dunk suddenly spoke, pointing out the broken window on the far end of the building. Sure enough, the trees were bustling and clearly something was moving back within them. We didn't dare stick around to see what it was and immediately made a mad dash for Ryuko's truck. As we filed inside, I saw shapes and silhouettes emerging from deep within the woods, but remaining far enough so that I couldn't get a clear look at them. As the headlights passed over them, I saw several pairs of gleaming eyes leering back at us. They were humanoid in appearance, but decidedly not human. Thankfully, we made it out without incident, and in no time we were back on the main road and speeding off back towards Thompson. We got back rather quickly compared to the journey out, and spent nearly the entire ride discussing what we'd witnessed out there. Ryuko stayed rather silent, and by the time I realized we had actually driven past Thompson, we were quite a ways past it. I asked Ryuko why he didn't stop in Thompson, and his response was not at all what I expected. "We're being followed." His words reverberated through the truck like a slow rolling thunder. The Suburban behind us turned out from a dark road shortly after we left that abandoned town. The three of us just stared silently at him, and he spoke again. "Don't look back." I then caught a glance of the gas gauge and realized we were approaching the E. Thankfully, a gas station wasn't too far off. But of course, the main worry was our pursuers. Shortly after, Ryuko turned off the highway, and sure enough, the headlights behind us mirrored his movement. Ryuko pulled into the brightly lit gas station, and the black Suburban with tinted windows followed. Pulling into the opposite side of the pump, Ryuko stepped out, and I got out with him. My heart was throbbing like crazy, but part of me wasn't even certain this Suburban was actually following us. We were sitting ducks though, with no one around aside from a single station attendant and their booth. Ryuko approached the pump, slid his card, and retrieved the nozzle as he slipped it into the gas slot. As soon as the gas began pumping, the driver's side door of the Suburban opened. Out stepped a tall man with a bald head wearing a suede black coat. I slipped my right hand behind my back and gripped the dagger in my belt, but knew if the man had a gun it probably wouldn't make much difference. The man casually rounded the front of his truck and came to a stop in front of Ryuko, who stared back defiantly. Something about his presence was deeply foreboding, like he was a simple Minuteman for some nefarious cult or group. With what we'd seen earlier, that didn't seem out of the realm of possibilities. His eyes sent chills down my spine, like there was nothing human behind his stare. The two of them just remained silent, deadlocked in a stare. "Can I help you?" Ryuko finally broke the silence, but the man said nothing, his expression unaltered and stance unchanged. Mercifully, the gas nozzle clicked behind us. Youll turned and removed it, opening his driver's side door and getting back in. The bald man then diverted his gaze to me, and he smiled. "Drive safe." With that simple phrase, he turned and got back into his vehicle. The windows were heavily tinted, but with the way the shadow bent on the passenger side, it was evident someone else was with him. Ryuko then rolled down my window. "Let's go." They didn't follow us any further, but the brief interaction left its mark on us. The four of us discussed it the entire way back, coming to the consensus that they were either government operatives or cult members. I shudder when I think of those things in that town. But clearly, someone has gone to great lengths to hide them. Posting to begin with is not a great idea, I know, but I had to do something. This all happened about a week ago now, and once Ryuko dropped us off, I haven't seen him since. No one's heard from him. His phone is off and he hasn't been on any of the online places he normally frequents. The police have been notified, but there's not much to go off of for them, apparently. He never even returned home the night after we got back. I hope he's okay. And Ryuko, if you're reading this, please contact me. I've been looking around online and even in public libraries, but so far I haven't been able to find any information on the town of Jigabas. If anyone knows anything about it, please feel free to share. But in the meantime, I just hope whoever that bald guy works for doesn't decide to come looking for us. What happened to my roommate? Many years ago, I was a travel writer in Europe. I did most of my trips alone. This story is about the first time I visited Prague. I'd never been to Prague and the trip was last minute, so I had little time to prepare. My travel partner had dumped me in another country, and I was determined to make the best out of trip by visiting a place I'd never been. Upon arrival at the train station, I visited the accommodation office and asked for a hostel not far from the center. In my early 20s, winging it was part of the fun. These days I'm far less adventurous. The hostel they sent me to was a sprawling, crumbling, slate gray Art Deco building on a nondescript street about a 10-minute walk to Stare Mesto. The inside was probably beautiful at one time, but by the time I checked in it was full of shabby, mismatched furniture and cheap stained carpet. Most of the light fixtures were broken, leaving everything but the lobby dark and gloomy. It smelled of standing water and dust. I found my room, a double for $12 per night, and made note of the fact that I had a roommate. She wasn't there, but on her side of the room there was a suitcase, dressed neatly folded across the back of a plastic chair, a scattering of makeup containers on the beat-up desk, and a stack of German fashion magazines on the bed. As I had no plans or goals on this impromptu trip, so I spent the afternoon exploring Old Town Square, the Jewish Quarter, and Wenceslas Square. I purchased some Czech crystal for my mom and painted eggs from a street vendor for myself. I also made reservations for a sunset dinner cruise for one. At around 6 p.m. I returned to my room to shower, change clothes, and unload my purchases. When I left my room about an hour later, there was no indication that my roommate had returned at any point during the day. After the cruise, I stopped at a tiny bar on Tinska and had a glass of wine. I'd heard horror stories about the dangers of Prague, but I felt no more trepidation than I did in any other large city. Sure, the cobblestone streets, fog rolling off the Vieltov, backlit Gothic architecture, and winding alleys made me think of Jack the Ripper and Dracula, but in a good way. It was nearly midnight when I returned to my hostel, so I was surprised to find that my roommate still hadn't returned. That wasn't uncommon, though. Backpackers are a fickle lot. She could have gone on a short overnight trip and just left her stuff behind, hooked up with a guy and was holed up at their place, or hanging out at another hostel, so I was surprised but not concerned. I took another shower before bed, however, and was surprised to find that things in the room had changed up in my return. Her bed was neatly turned down, the magazines had moved to the nightstand, and the dress was gone. The strangest thing, though, was the addition of a pink silky nightgown spread across the bed. My bed. Maybe she thought she still had the room to herself. I didn't see how my shopping bags, clothes, and toiletries were in plain view. I gently moved the nightgown over to her bed and then settled in for the night. As I wrote in my journal, I assumed she was in the shower or somewhere nearby, so I expected her return shortly. After about an hour, though her side was still empty, I needed to use the restroom before I went to sleep, so I made one last trip down the hall. The building was unusually quiet. There weren't the regular sounds of chatty backpackers, the clinking of glasses, or music that would normally leak through the walls. There was nothing. It was hushed, like a church after the congregation has left. I found myself practically tiptoeing back. My room was near the end of the hall, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the corridor was darker than before. The few working lights were blinking as they struggled to stay lit, and it reminded me of a fun house. A tightness began to fill my stomach, and I subconsciously quickened my steps. There wasn't a soul behind me, yet I kept glancing back over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone gaining momentum on me. The only sound was the soft thud of my flip-flops as they struck my soles. I was flooded with relief as I flung open my door, but it didn't last long. Everything was exactly as it left it except for the silky nightgown, which was now back on my bed. Sleep came in fits and starts. I left the lamp on for a while, still convinced my roommate would be right back, but the shadows it cast made the room even spookier. It was too dark with the light off. I'd finally slipped into a deep sleep when I suddenly heard the door open. A man stood in the darkened doorway, the hall light behind him showing just enough for me to see his contorted face. "I didn't mean to," he sobbed. "You have to help me." Too confused and disoriented to be scared, I sat up, scrubbed at my eyes, and reached for the lamp switch. But once the room was light, I saw that the door was closed. There was no man. I quickly bounded off the bed and went for the door. It was locked. Nobody could have entered without a key. And the hallway, empty. I passed the rest of the night fully clothed, sitting up in bed, and with the light on. Though I'd paid for 2 more nights. At 7 a.m. I gathered all my stuff and went down to the reception desk to check out. By the way, I said to the 20-something receptionist, my roommate never returned. I'm a little concerned. She picked up the room key, looked at it hard, frowned, and then glanced at her computer. What room were you in again? When I repeated it to her, she looked back at her screen. Ma'am, that room's been empty for 3 weeks and it's been clean since then. We only have 6 people in the whole building. The hostel has since been renovated and is now a luxury hotel. I realized that we didn't physically meet, but I thought it relevant since I seemed to have met someone. Someone entered and left my room. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, then hit the like. See you guys next time.